Hey, hello everybody. Welcome to Sane Game Studios. I'm Sane. I'm an amateur game developer. Today I'm going to be doing a quick tutorial on how to do a boomerang in a top-down game, like a Zelda clone, like Zelda Link to the Past. And it's not super complicated, and I didn't know how to do this at first, so I went to YouTube and I started looking for tutorials, and I found a couple tutorials on how to do boomerangs, but they either were for side-scrolling games in which you only have 2 dimensions for throwing the boomerang, or they were more just showing off the mechanic and not overly explaining how to build one. So I figured I would take the time, now that I figured out how to do it, to show you guys how to do a boomerang in a top-down game. By the end of this video, we'll have a boomerang that will be behaving like this. As you can see, I can throw it. It will go like a certain distance away from me, and then it will return to me. And then it'll also be thrown in any direction in which I am facing. And then also, after I have thrown it, I can hit the boomerang button again, and that will force it to return to me if it is not already returning to me. That way you can interrupt mid-throw and recall the boomerang. And then also it will destroy itself when it collides with the player. So I guess with that out of the way, I can show you what I have going on for my starter project. I really don't have a whole lot. I have a room that is 480 by 270, and it has a viewport that is 480 by 270. Well, it says a camera that's 480 by 270, and then a viewport that's twice as big so that we can zoom in a little bit and I can show you a little bit more what's going on. Other than that, I have a handful of sprites. I have a boomerang sprite. It doesn't have more than one frame. We'll be animating it through code. And then I just have my player movement sprites where I have 4 directions of movement. From there, I also have my player object. I don't have any sprite assigned to it, but I'm assigning it through code. In my create event, I just have some super basic stuff. I got my player input variables, I have my movement variables, and then I have my directional variables. I'll be showing you exactly what it is that those are doing. So if I go into my step event, zoom in a little bit here. So first thing I am doing is I'm getting my player input. I am using my player input to calculate a direction in which I should be moving. And then I am figuring out how quickly I should be moving in each axis to reach my destination. Down here, I am moving the player. Here, if I am not moving, I'm setting my image index to 0 so that when I stop moving mid-step, he doesn't just pause his animation mid-step. I'm setting my image speed to also, I'm setting my input speed to either be 0 or 1, depending on whether or not I am moving. I use abs and absolute and sign so that the sign always returns a value of -1, 0, or 1, and then abs will always turn the sign, like sign -1 will turn it into a 1, and then I use that to allocate my image speed because I don't want my image speed to end up being -1. Here I am just grabbing a variable to make sure that I am not pressing anything, and then I am just minusing all of my inputs off of it, and then if it equals 0, then I'm not pressing anything, but if it equals anything but 0, then I am pressing something, and if I am pressing something, I update my sprite, and then I also update my directional holder. That's what dir holder is. So if I'm hitting something, I am updating this because I need to know, even when I'm not moving, what direction my player actually is facing. And if I stop moving, input direction, which is being set up here, will default to 0. But if I was facing upwards, I need it to be at 90 and not at 0. So I use this holder variable to hold this value while I am not moving. And then that will actually become very, very important later on, because we're going to use this to tell the boomerang which direction that we are throwing it. And then if I run this, my player actually doesn't animate until I hit something, but I'm not too concerned about it because this is just a tutorial. It's not actually a game. But as you can see, I can move around. So with that, let's get into how to build a boomerang. So the first thing actually I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a new object. I'm just going to call it O Boomerang. I'm going to go into its create event, and I'm going to set up a couple variables. I'm going to set up a variable called for rotation. I'm going to call it ROT, and I'm going to have that equal 15, which is just an arbitrary number that I've figured out that works nicely for my sprite, that it looks like it's spinning at a healthy speed. The higher this number, the faster it spins. The lower the number, the slower it spins. I'm going to set my speed to equal 0, move direction to equal 0, my return direction to equal 0, and then I'm going to have another variable called decel, which stands for decelerate, and I'm going to have it equal 0.3. And if you guys ever watched my my platformer movement tutorial, I'm essentially going to be using this the same way that I use gravity, to decrease the speed over time, and then when it hits 0 to minus it off. Oh, and then one more thing actually I'm going to declare is I'm going to declare a state variable, because we're going to be using a state machine for this. And I'm going to use a string, and I'm going to declare it as away. From there, I'm going to go into this step event. That should be all we need for the create event. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go image angle plus equals ROT. And now I'm going to do a switch statement, and this is how we're going to build the state machine. You go switch state. Then we go case away. Break. Anytime that you use the switch statement, make sure you always use a break at the end of it. Otherwise, it will after one case, it will continue and run the code for the next case. And we're going to be changing the state in the switch statement and then using the separate cases to run the state machine. So we're going to want to make sure that it's only running one state at a time. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to change our speed variable. And I'm going to say if speed is greater than 0, speed minus equals decel. Oh, see, I made a mistake. I declared speed as SPD, as SP when I need to declare it as SPD. And then since decel is 0.3, there is actually a very high chance that it will be it won't ever actually land at 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say else speed equals 0. And then we're going to actually, I'm also going to declare horizontal speed to equal 0. and vertical speed to equal 0. So we're going to be using the player's direction, which we'll be setting with the code in which we spawn the boomerang to set it, but we can do all the calculations for it now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say HSP equals length dir x, and then the length is going to be speed, and then the direction is going to be move direction. And then VSP is going to equal length dir y. We'll be moving at a rate of speed, again, in move direction. And then if speed equals 0, we're going to change the state to equal return. And then finally, because I like to do this right at the very end, I'm going to say x plus equals HSP and y plus equals VSP. And then I'm going to do another case. I'm going to go case return. Break. And then I'm going to say speed plus equals decel, because we're going to use a deceleration variable now to accelerate. And then I'm going to say return direction is going to equal point direction xy, and then oPlayer.x and oPlayer.y. And then I'm going to grab these lines. I'm going to pop them in there. And then I'm going to say x plus equals HSP, y plus equals VSP. So I'll go over a little bit what I did here. So I'm taking my speed, which is set at 0 right now, because when speed equaled 0, I changed the state to return. So going into this, we know that the speed is going to be 0, but we want to accelerate, so we're going to increase it by the rate in which we decelerated it. And then we are going to set a new direction for it to go, which is its return direction. And we are setting that direction by comparing our position to the player's position. And then we are using that direction to set our horizontal speed and our vertical speed. And then we are going to be moving in those directions. And then finally, if place meeting x, y, o player, instance destroy self. And that is realistically all that we need just to run a very basic boomerang. But we still need to be able to create that boomerang. So for that, I'm going to go into my O player. I'm going to create a new input variable. Now I'm going to call it key boomerang. It's going to equal false, just to declare it. And then here, I'm going to say key boomerang equals keyboard check pressed vk space. This is just how I'm going to do it, just to show you guys how this works. but you can allocate your input for that however you wish, whether you want to create like a variable so you can like equip it and then assign it to, you know, your equipment button or whatever it is you want to do. This is just to show you guys how it works. So if I'm going to go if key boomerang, then I'm also going to say if instance exists boomerang, boomerang dot state equals return. So all this is doing is that if we hit the boomerang button and the boomerang already exists, we're going to tell the boomerang to return to us. But if it doesn't exist, so else, I'm going to go instance create layer. I'm going to say X, Y. I'm going to create it on the instances layer. I'm going to say boomerang. Then we still have to set a couple variables with the boomerang. So you have to tell it what direction it's going, how fast it's going to be going in that direction, all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to say boomerang dot move direction is going to equal our direction holder. And that is because if I am not moving, my input direction is going to equal 0. But if I'm facing upwards, I don't want to be throwing it at angle 0, which is to the right. I want to be throwing it upwards. So I've stored that value here so that I can plug it in here and it will throw in whichever direction we are currently facing. Then I'm also going to say boomerang dot speed equals 10. And that should be good, as far as I know. I learned how to do this today, so let's run it and see what happens. Oh. I never gave it a sprite. See? You throw it, and it comes back. And if we move, it will come back to wherever we are. And we can throw it in any direction in which we are facing. And like the boomerang won't do anything. I haven't created any objects for it to pick up. I haven't created any enemies for it to attack or stun, or however it is you want your boomerang to affect the enemies. But now that you have it throwing, you should be able to figure out how to just do some collision checks, see what it hits, and have it react accordingly. Well, yeah, so that's all I really have for today. I tried to keep it short and sweet because it's not a super complicated thing to do. But like I said, when I went to go look for how to do this, I didn't find much for tutorials on how to do exactly this. So I figured that since I had to figure it out, I would save you guys the hassle of trying to figure it out, and I would just show you guys how I figured it out. And with that, you have a boomerang. So I'm going to thank you guys very much for watching. I hope this has been insightful or helpful to you, and I hope it helps you build some awesome games. If you liked this video or you appreciated it, like it, That always helps me out. If you want to see more tutorials or anything like that, you can go ahead and subscribe to my channel. If you have any ideas for kind of tutorials that you would like to see in the future, I honestly, every single weekend, I sit down and I think to myself, oh man, what kind of video am I going to be releasing this week? And then I have to figure it out. So if you guys just want to see something, you want to learn something, please comment it down below and I will absolutely gladly make that tutorial. And if I don't know how to do it, I will figure out how to do it so that I can make that tutorial. But yeah, if you have any comments or questions or anything like that, feel free to get a hold of me through the comments and I will answer all the questions and help you guys any way that I can. So yeah, with that, I'm going to say once more, please like and subscribe, and thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you guys next time. Have a good one. Peace out.